Welcome back to Football Daily, where for today's 11 we're bringing you a team of players who, despite carving out good careers for themselves, didn't reach the heights expected of them early on. Let's get into it. Goalkeeper, Chris Kirkland. Considering his relatively standard career trajectory, it's often easy to forget that Chris Kirkland was once thought of as the future of English goalkeeping. Coming through Coventry City's youth academy, he made his debut for the Sky Blues as an 18-year-old in 1999, establishing himself as the first choice in the 2000-2001 season. Despite Premier League relegation that campaign, he was voted Player of the Year by his teammates and made his England under-21 debut. So it was no surprise that the big clubs came calling, and at the age of 20, he became the most expensive British goalkeeper, as Liverpool spent £6 million on him in 2001. However, despite this, he initially failed to displace Jerzy Dudek between the sticks at Anfield, and when he finally did in 2003, Kirkland suffered an ankle injury, then a back injury, then a finger injury. In 5 years with Liverpool, he only made 45 appearances in all competitions. Kirkland finally became a first-team player again when moving to Wigan, and after 6 seasons dropped out of the Premier League, seeing out his career with Leicester, Sheffield Wednesday and Preston before retirement in 2016. For someone labelled the future of a position, just one England cap doesn't reflect his potential. Defender, Micah Richards. Our first defender is Micah Richards, whose entire career featured just 3 clubs: Manchester City, Aston Villa and an oft-forgotten loan spell at Fiorentina. Born in Birmingham, Richards bounced around academies in Leeds and Oldham before settling in Manchester, where after a few years he was fast-tracked to the first team as a 17-year-old, making his debut in October 2005. By the following season he was a regular in the City side and the national team, but was constantly linked with a move away from the City of Manchester Stadium. Tottenham reportedly had a £5 million bid rejected. But when the club had that sudden cash injection, Richards began to see his game time deteriorate, and struggling with injuries too, made just 18 appearances between 2012 and 2014, before an underwhelming stint in Serie A with Fiorentina. And then came his infamous spell with hometown club Aston Villa. Signing a 4-year deal in 2015, he was relegated with the side in his first campaign, and more injury woes limited him to just 3 appearances the next year. And despite Richards staying on the books until last summer, he failed to play another game for the club and has since retired, disappearing just like that. Defender, Brennan. There is many a story of young Brazilians coming over to Europe but failing to make an impression and heading back across the Atlantic with their tail between their legs. And whilst Breno Borges didn't impress on the field, he definitely left a mark off it. The centre-back broke through at Sao Paulo in 2007, leading to links from the likes of Fiorentina, Juventus and Milan. After refusing to join Real Madrid after they wanted further tests to prove he was just 18, Breno moved to Bayern Munich after they paid his €12 million release clause. But despite having compatriot Lucio to learn from in training, the youngster only made 22 appearances in 2.5 years before a brief loan spell with Nuremberg, where he sustained a cruciate ligament injury. And then came the notoriety. Breno was arrested for the arson of his own house in Munich and was ultimately sentenced to almost 4 years in prison. Despite working as a youth team coach with Bayern whilst on day release, Breno was deported upon his full release in 2015. He rejoined Sao Paulo and has since moved to Vasco da Gama, but injuries have limited him to only a few dozen appearances since restarting his career. Defender, Duncan Edwards. Next up we have former Manchester United all-rounder Duncan Edwards. Unfortunately, Edwards didn't reach his full potential as he was one of 8 players who lost their lives due to the Munich air disaster in 1958, but the youngster was tipped to be an all-time great in the sport. Nominally a left half, which is effectively a defensive midfielder in today's parlance, he could reputedly play anywhere on the pitch. Before dying at just 21, Dudley-born Edwards had already made 177 appearances for United, and when he made his debut in 1953, became the youngest ever player to feature in the English top flight at just 16 years and 185 days. Then at the age of 18 years and 183 days, Edwards became England's youngest ever international, and it's believed that he would have been the man lifting the World Cup trophy in 1966 instead of Bobby Moore. And in fact, Moore referred to Edwards as a rock at the back but dynamic going forward, a sentiment shared amongst his contemporaries, as Bobby Charlton said Edwards was the only player that ever made him feel inferior. A certified legend of the game who still had so much more to give. Midfielder, Ricardo Quaresma. For a player that has achieved so much in his career, Ricardo Quaresma could have achieved so much more. Breaking into the sporting side as a 17-year-old in 2001, the season before a certain Cristiano Ronaldo made his mark in Lisbon, the tricky winger made 74 appearances in 2 years before a dream move to Barcelona. But he'd only stay at the Camp Nou for one campaign, when as a 21-year-old he publicly denounced Frank Rijkaard's management of the club, forcing them to sell him back to his homeland, where he performed well for Porto for 4 years, winning 3 league titles. A transfer to Inter Milan followed, but again Quaresma floundered, being voted as the worst Serie A player in 2008. Once described as a mercurial talent, when people think of Quaresma today they recall his Rabonas and Trivelas, but as his career saw him have an underwhelming Premier League spell, as well as moves to the UAE and Turkey where he's been since 2015, he never truly achieved his early promise. But he has always been one of Portugal's more talented players, with a key role in their Euro 2016 triumph. Definitely his crowning glory. Midfielder Mesut Ozil. It might be a bit harsh to put Mesut Ozil in this underachievers 11, but the truth is that his career has somewhat stalled over the past few years. Picking up nicknames like the German Messi or the German Zidane, he was already a regular in Germany's starting 11 as a 21-year-old. Ozil rose to stardom with his performances at the 2010 World Cup, as Die Mannschaft reached the semi-finals, leading to Real Madrid signing him for the relatively cheap fee of €15 million. But as is always the case with Los Blancos, it's 1 star in, 1 out, and the signing of Gareth Bale in 2013 saw Ozil move on to Arsenal. And it started so well in London, peaking in 2015-16 with a 19-assist campaign as Arsenal finished second to Leicester City. However, the departure of Arsene Wenger in 2018 was a watershed moment, as Ozil went on to spend a year in the wilderness despite signing a huge new deal to stay at the Emirates. With Mikel Arteta now in charge, Ozil is back in the team, but at 31 is running out of time to add to his single league title, won with Madrid back in 2012. Midfielder Jack Wilshere. Let's be honest, when you saw the title of this 11, Jack Wilshere was one of the first names that popped into your head. Coming through the youth ranks at Arsenal, he became the Gunners' youngest ever league debutant at 16 years and 256 days in 2008, and before he was 20 had won the PFA Young Player of the Year and was selected for the 2010-11 PFA Team of the Year. Injury issues, though, quickly derailed his career. In 2011-12, Wilshere didn't play a single match thanks to an ankle injury, and while he was still favoured by Arsene Wenger, he could never reclaim his spot in the side for more than a few games at a time. Tipped as a future England captain, he only featured 3 times in 2015-16 due to a broken leg, and would spend the next year on loan at Bournemouth. In 2018, his contract expired, and he moved across London to play for West Ham United, but despite his reputed £100k a week contract, Wilshere has featured just 16 times. These days it seems like you're more likely to see him jumping out of washing machines or two-footing his wife than you are to see him with a ball at his feet. Midfielder Juan Romn Riquelme. Considering his reputation in the game, it may come as a surprise that Juan Romn Riquelme played in Europe for just 4.5 seasons. Making his debut for Boca Juniors in his native Argentina as an 18-year-old in 1996, Riquelme racked up almost 200 appearances by the age of 24 and got a move to Barcelona. But things didn't go to plan. Boss Louis van Gaal was not a fan of his, rarely starting him, and when he did, out of position on the wing. The following summer, Barca signed Ronaldinho, and it was Riquelme that had to make way, moving to Villarreal, hardly a glamorous move. But in his natural number 10 role, Riquelme earned himself a nomination for the 2005 FIFA World Player of the Year. But just as his career looked like it was set to take off, a falling out with Manuel Pellegrini sent him back to Boca in 2007, and he hasn't left Argentina again. Recognised as one of the last true number 10s, the belief is that his lack of pace hindered him in the European game. A legend in Argentina and a cult hero around the globe, most of us are left imagining what Riquelme could have been. Midfielder Alvaro Recoba. Very much in the same vein as Riquelme, Alvaro Recoba was a South American with almost unlimited potential, yet never quite reached the heights expected of him. The Uruguayan attacker made the move in 1997 across the Atlantic from his homeland to Inter Milan for over 30 billion lira, or 17 million euros in today's money. A set-piece and passing specialist who could also dribble at pace, it appeared that Recoba had everything that was needed to thrive in Europe. But despite 2 debut goals, he failed to impress initially, only really catching the eye after a loan spell with relegation-threatened Venezia in 1999. The following season, Recoba was made the highest paid player in football, earning over €100,000 a week, and spent the entirety of his 20s with the Nerazzurri, but never netted more than 10 goals in a Serie A campaign. He may have 2 Scudetti and a UEFA Cup to show for his time in Europe, but following his departure from Inter, he didn't play in a top 5 league again. He did have injury troubles like many on his list, but was often criticised for an indifferent attitude and poor work rate, hence why many believe he didn't live up to his potential. Forward, Mario Balotelli. It's hard to put a finger on what exactly has gone wrong with Mario Balotelli's career. 2010's Golden Boy has played for a number of big teams, both Milan clubs, Manchester City, Liverpool and Marseille, as well as netting 14 times for the Italian national team. His talent is there for sure, but known for being unpredictable and enigmatic off the pitch has probably contributed to why he hasn't been able to sustain himself at a top side. Described by former bosses Jose Mourinho as unmanageable and Roberto Mancini as crazy, Balotelli's time as a pro has been riddled with incidents away from the game. These include firing air pistols in Milan city centre, driving into a women's prison in Italy to have a look around, and of course that infamous bathroom fireworks incident whilst with City. After underwhelming spells with Liverpool and AC Milan, it looked like Balotelli was heading in the right direction with 43 goals in 2 years for Nice, earning him a move to Marseille in January 2019. However, his stay in France lasted just 6 more months, signing for hometown club Brescia in a move that many players make as their last hurrah, admitting their career at the top is over. Forward, Antonio Cassano. Upon signing for Roma from hometown side Bari in 2001 for 60 billion lira or 30 million euros, 19-year-old Antonio Cassano became the most expensive teenager in world football. But that was pretty much the highlight of the Italian's career, never quite discovering his potential in 5 years in the capital. But regardless, like his teammate Francesco Totti, Real Madrid came calling, and against El Capitano's advice, Cassano made the move across the Mediterranean. And it was in Madrid that Cassano's urges got the better of him. After admitting he'd been seduced by Los Blancos, the 24-year-old claims to have spent most nights with his 2 true loves, women and pastries. Acquiring the nickname Gordito from the Spanish press, Cassano netted just twice in 19 La Liga games and was quickly shipped back to Italy. A resurgence at Sampdoria, averaging a goal every 3 games, led to spells at both Milan clubs, but again he flattered to deceive, although it did emerge he had an underlying heart condition. He retired in 2017 after a second stint with Samp, before unretiring to join Hellas Verona, just to change his mind again a week later. Even Cassano himself admitted that he hadn't achieved even 50% of what he could have. So those are our players who didn't fulfill their potential, but who did we miss out and who would you have included? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this 11, then make sure that you drop us a like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell to never miss a video. We'll see you next time.